A good work. Good work if you can get it. Inspired out of Psalms 139. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians. As a teenager, Charles Spurgeon wrestled with God. There's a famous preacher. He'd grown up going to church, but what was preached seemed bland and meaningless. It was a struggle for him to believe in God, and Charles, in his own words, rebelled and revolted. One night, a fierce snowstorm forced the 16-year-old Spurgeon to seek shelter in a tiny Methodist church. The pastor's sermon seemed directed at him personally. In that moment, God won the wrestling match, and Charles gave his heart to Jesus. Spurgeon later wrote, "Long before I began with Christ, he began with me." In fact, our life with God doesn't begin with the moment of salvation. The psalmist notes that God created our inmost being, knitting us together in our mother's womb. The Apostle Paul writes, "Even before I was born, God chose me and called me by his marvelous grace." And God doesn't stop working with us when we're saved. He who began a work in you will carry it on to completion. In case you don't know, Spurgeon, these are foundational statements if you're a Calvinist. He talks about here, in fact, our life with God doesn't begin with the moment of salvation. Even before I was born, God chose me and called me by, okay. Yeah, if most people are Calvinists, whether they know it or not, because most churches have a Calvinist point of view. I don't. I'll just leave it at that. I don't get too far in the weeds here. And God doesn't stop working with us when we're saved. He who began it's just the way they say this. I can't. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. We're all works in progress. I agree. In the hands of a loving God, he leads us through our rebellious wrestling and into his warm embrace. But his purpose with us then is only beginning. For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him. Rest assured, we're his good work, regardless of how old we are or what stage of life we are in. How's God's working in your life at this very moment? What's he doing with you for his purposes? Loving God, I'm overwhelmed to think of your loving care for me from the moment of my birth. Thank you. Help me to respond to your ongoing work in my life. I think I can explain this here. Even before I was born, God chose me and called me by his marvelous grace. And God doesn't stop working with us when we're saved. It's past tense. So he's speaking as though, okay, you did something, now you're saved. Okay, now God's continued to work with you even after that. I believe God is working with you until at some point you will be saved. It is to come. But that's where I disagree with most churches today anyway. They got this. Anyhow, I think I've already said enough. Love you. God bless.